Hey, if you're on thyroid meds and you're still not feeling your best, you're experiencing brain fog, fatigue, hair loss, cold intolerance, perhaps insomnia or other odd symptoms that seem kind of thyroid ish, but you're not really sure, you may want to look into your T3 levels. T3 matters because it is the more active thyroid hormone. And in many cases, people are not able to properly convert the thyroid medicine that contains T4 into T3. I'm Dr. Izabella Wentz, your thyroid pharmacist, and this is the Thyroid Pharmacist Healing Conversations podcast. Today, we're going to deep dive into how to make T3 naturally and how to support your own conversion of T4 to T3. So, if you've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism and you're still struggling with fatigue, weight gain, brain fog, hair loss, even while taking levothyroxine or Synthroid, your T3 levels might be part of the puzzle. Today, we're going to walk through how to increase your T3 levels naturally using a combination of root cause medicine, lifestyle changes, nutrition, and even some supplements that can help you. I've been wanting to make this video for a really long time because while you can absolutely boost your T3 levels with medicine like Cytomel, liothyronine, or a natural desiccated thyroid that contains T3, like Armor or even compounded medications, there's oftentimes root causes that prevent the proper conversion to T4 and T3. So some people might even be on the natural desiccated thyroid meds and may still be having symptoms, and they still need to address those root causes for poor T4 to T3 conversion. And they may also really benefit from this. Other people might not have access to T3 containing medications or may prefer not to take them, or they might have adverse reactions to them. So, I'm going to teach you how to make your own T3 naturally. We'll start off by talking about why free T3 matters. T3 triiodothyronine, say that 3 times fast, is the most biologically active thyroid hormone, while T4 thyroxine is the primary hormone secreted by your thyroid gland. T4 must be converted into T3 to actually do the majority of the work it needs to do. So, T3 is the more metabolically active thyroid hormone that supports energy production, metabolism, digestion, hair growth, mood, as well as our temperature regulation. T3 binds to thyroid receptors in our cells with much higher affinity than T4, so it's much more effective at activating the thyroid receptors. So, if you are taking a medication like levothyroxine or Synthroid and your body's not converting enough of the T4 to T3, you might be left with a lot of different symptoms. You might continue to experience a lot of symptoms of hypothyroidism even if your labs look normal to your endocrinologist. If your endocrinologist is testing your TSH and that's within the normal reference range, but yet you're still struggling with thyroid symptoms, this could be the root cause. Now, the reason why most doctors prescribe levothyroxine or T4 containing medication is because T4 is generally going to be converted in the body to T3. Actually, 80% of it is converted through the liver and the gut, but also the kidneys, muscles, and other tissues in the body are going to make that conversion for us. Whereas the thyroid gland, if it was healthy and normally producing, it would only make about 20% of the total T3 that we need. And so levothyroxine seems like a very convenient option, and it makes sense on paper because the body should convert it into T3. This is known as a prodrug, so a drug that's not super active by itself, but when the body activates it, that's when it becomes really useful to the body. Now, there are many reasons why this doesn't always happen in real life, although it does happen perfectly on paper every single time. So, We're going to walk through 9 strategies on how you can support healthy T3 levels naturally. But before we do that, let's talk about how to tell if you actually have enough T3, if this is an issue that you are personally dealing with. One of the best ways to see if you're getting enough T3 is to look at your thyroid labs. On lab tests, you'll want to make sure that you're checking free T3, reverse T3, and free T4. So, free T3 and free T4 are the free and available thyroid hormones that are available to interact with our thyroid receptors. When doctors measure total T3 and T4, that may not give us quite as much information as we can get from that free T3 and free T4. And then reverse T3 is actually a type of thyroid hormone that blocks thyroid receptors and prevents the active thyroid hormones from getting into the cells. Most conventionally trained doctors don't test for this, but this test is readily available. And so, what you're going to do to figure out if you're properly converting your T4 to T3 is you're going to look at the numbers. And if your T4 is normal or high, but your T3 is low, that's going to be a red flag that you're not converting this well. So, looking at a reference range, I typically would draw like a rainbow and I would put the bottom of the reference range for T4 on the left side and the top of the reference range on the right side. And I would draw this rainbow arch again for T3. And then I would put the bottom of the reference range for T3 and the top of the reference range for T3 on the right side. Then I would find your exact results. And then I would make a little dot on top of that rainbow arch and draw an arrow from the middle part of the reference range. And those arrows, if you are converting properly, should both be pointing roughly in that same direction. If you've got, let's say, your T4 levels above the middle of the reference range, but you've got your free T3 levels below the middle of the reference range, that could also mean that you are under converting. And then the reverse T3, if this is going to be high on your reference range, that means that your body is for some reason getting the message that you need to put on the brakes, and that's going to prevent proper utilization of T3, and it can also indicate poor conversion. You, of course, will also want to test your TSH, but generally speaking, most doctors test TSH. And if you are just looking at your TSH by itself, you're not going to be able to know if you are properly converting that T4 to T3. Then, of course, there are the thyroid symptoms despite being on thyroid medications, even when your labs are normal. And these include fatigue, weight gain, or trouble losing weight. You're losing hair, you've got cold hands and feet. You might have depression or brain fog, constipation. And you don't actually have to be actively losing hair, but if your hair is thinning and it's not looking vibrant, that's going to be a red flag for me too, that you might not be converting T4 to T3. In my own personal experience with Hashimoto's, when I have had times in my life where I was taking T4 only medications and my body wasn't converting T4 to T3 properly, I would notice that my hair was just more difficult to brush. It would get really easily tangled. So, if you've got curly hair, this might not work as well for you. But if you've got straight, baby fine hair like me, this might be a red flag for you as well. So, this sounds familiar. It might be worth digging deeper and supporting your body's ability to make, convert, and utilize T3. In case I didn't explain that whole rainbow situation correctly, I'm going to add a document in the show notes with how to draw your own rainbow to determine if you are properly converting your T4 to T3. So, how to get healthy levels of T3. So, again, you can definitely get on a medication like Cytomel liothyronine that contains T3 directly. You can get on a medication like Armour that contains T4 and T3, and that's a natural desiccated thyroid, or you can get on compounded medications. Some of them are T3 only, some of them have T4 and T3. These are all things you could potentially discuss with your doctor if you're not properly converting your T4 to T3. I oftentimes do advocate this for a lot of people because giving you T3 directly can bypass some of the reasons why you may not be converting T4 to T3. But that said, there's still going to be a lot of reasons and root causes that you potentially might want to address just to feel like a healthy, thriving human, right? And I know some people T3 medications might not be available to them. They might not be appropriate for them. They might make them feel overly stimulated. And so, we're going to go through some natural ways and root cause approach ways to support your T3 levels. So, let's start off by talking about the reasons why people may not convert T4 to T3 directly. One of these reasons is aging. So everything just changes as we get older, and that T4 to T3 conversion can be a part of that. Another one is genetics. Some people, because of their unique genetic makeup, just don't make that conversion happen as efficiently as others can. I believe this is about 10% of the population, where even if everything else were perfect for them, they're just not going to make that T4 to T3 conversion. Drinking excessive alcohol, chemotherapy, smoking cigarettes, having diabetes, excessive fasting, excessive exercise, growth hormone deficiency, heavy metals, iodine excess, kidney and liver disease. Remember, a majority of that conversion does happen in the liver, low progesterone, various medications, nutrient depletions. We'll get into which ones, obesity, pesticide exposure, radiation, stress, soy, recovering from surgery or trauma. So, all of these things, ideally, we want to avoid them. We can't avoid aging, we can't avoid our genes, but some of the others, if we can minimize exposure to them, we can do ourselves a big favor in terms of T4 to T3 conversion. This is a big part of what I teach is how to avoid toxins, how to support your body in living your best life, right? How to thrive in a modern toxic world. So, the top things I would say I see with my clients that can really mess with their T4 to T3 conversion would be caloric restriction or fasting excessively. So, intermittent fasting, if you eat your last meal at 7 and then you go to sleep at 9 and then you wake up and have breakfast, that's probably not going to affect your T4 to T3 conversion. But if you're going under 1200 calories a day, if you're doing, fasting all throughout the day and you're doing multiple fasting, just really doing that, a lot of it, that's can really suppress your T4 to T3 conversion. That sends your body the message that you are not safe and you need to slow down your metabolism, right? That makes so much sense. Our body's always tuning into the subtle messages that it gets from the environment. Then we have environmental toxins. Perchlorate, BPA are some of the ones that have been studied. Again, we can't live in a bubble, and the bubble would probably be plastic filled with BPA anyway. But we can support our liver to try to get rid of those toxins, and we can also try to be mindful about limiting our exposure. So we're not microwaving our food in plastic containers, right? We're heating up our food on the stove. We're not like inhaling fireworks. Fireworks can be a perchlorate source. Low protein intake can actually suppress that T4 to T3 conversion. And then inflammatory diets, sugar, processed foods, gluten sensitivity, and some. These are all potential things that I would recommend avoiding. So get your protein, get on an anti inflammatory diet, minimize your stress, minimize your toxic exposure. Make sure you're getting enough calories for your body. Don't overdo it with fasting and over exercising. So, nutrient deficiencies. Some of the most common reasons I see for that poor T4 to T3 conversion, and oftentimes even high reverse T3, could be nutrient deficiencies. One of these nutrients that I think deserves special attention is ferritin, which is the iron storage protein. Most people with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism are actually going to be deficient in this. But again, it's a matter of their doctors not running the correct labs. And so most doctors might look at your hemoglobin hematocrit, and that can be normal, but you can still be anemic and iron deficient when you have low ferritin. And this is an iron storage protein that's very, very relevant to T4 and T3 conversion. And so oftentimes, red flag for me is hair loss. You're on thyroid meds, but you're still losing hair. Let's make sure your ferritin is dialed in. You could still have fatigue, cold intolerance. You can also have insomnia. I know I've had this a few times in my life, and insomnia can be a big symptom for myself personally. Other people will report they have restless leg syndrome. Other people might report that they have mood related symptoms. They might actually be depressed when their ferritin is low. So you can check this on a blood test. Ideal range is going to be 70 to 110 for hair growth and thyroid function. This is something, again, this is very, very common, and it tends to be common in people with heavy periods, right? Because we lose our blood. Women postpartum, this can be a big, big issue because we use so much of our iron to create our beautiful babies. And then, of course, we lose blood postpartum. Lactation is also a big use of our iron stores. My two favorite ways of supporting your ferritin levels would be utilizing a lactoferrin supplement as well as using iron infusions. The tricky part about having low ferritin levels is sometimes it's because you're losing too much blood. If you have heavy menses, for example, and this could be a progesterone issue, or it could be because you are not absorbing your iron properly. It could be because of low stomach acid. It could be because of SIBO. It could be because you've got like crazy gut bugs, right, going on. And you might take an oral iron supplement, but oftentimes it leaves you constipated, and you can also just not properly utilize it. So you could be taking an iron supplement day after day, and then your ferritin levels and symptoms don't budge for months and months and months. So lactoferrin has a unique way to get into your body without feeding the bad bugs in your system. And iron infusions, because they go in your veins, they also bypass the gut. So, for many women who are unable to absorb iron from oral supplements, like myself, can really benefit from lactoferrin or iron infusions. So, this is one that I would recommend testing for. If you haven't tested, this is a non negotiable for me to make sure you get your ferritin levels tested when you have Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. The other important nutrients that are very relevant for proper T4 to T3 conversion are going to include selenium. It's a cofactor for the deiodinase enzymes that basically take one iodine away from T4 to T3. Zinc is also very important for thyroid hormone synthesis and T3 receptor sensitivity. And then vitamins A and D are also involved in the activation of T3 and immune modulation. So if you are deficient in any of these, you may wish to supplement. Generally speaking, selenium in doses of up to 200 micrograms per day has been shown to be helpful for people with Hashimoto's. It can actually reduce thyroid antibodies and make people feel better, reducing anxiety, reducing thyroid symptoms. Zinc in doses of up to 30 milligrams per day is generally going to be well tolerated. You don't necessarily need to test it. Vitamin A and D in low dosages, you don't necessarily need to test for. However, in some cases, if you're going to be utilizing like above 5,000 IUs of vitamin D, I would make sure that you do a test before you try to supplement with that. And vitamin D is a very, very common nutrient deficiency in Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. And really, all of these are going to be very, very common and helpful for proper thyroid function. The third strategy to really look into for supporting your T4 to T3 conversion is to support your liver. Now, my book, Hashimoto's Protocol, the very first 2 week protocol was focused on supporting the liver. And I accidentally came across liver support for one of my clients who just wasn't feeling better with anything. And it worked so well for her. And then for subsequent clients, that I just started using liver support for everybody. Now, it works really, really well to get people feeling better quickly because more than 50% of the T4 to T3 conversion happens in the liver. So, this is going to be a foundational plan for supporting thyroid balance. If you have insulin resistance, non alcoholic fatty liver disease, environmental toxin exposure, the liver might already be on your radar as something you need to support. However, most people with Hashimoto's still are going to have impaired ability to get rid of toxins, and they have something that I call a liver backlog. Now, basically, what that means is their liver is overburdened and doesn't have enough cofactors to properly process thyroid hormones and toxins. And so, what ends up happening is your toxins recirculate and your hormones aren't properly activated or eliminated. And so, supporting your liver's backlog, and basically that's giving it a break from toxins and supporting some cofactors can be very helpful in that T4 to T3 conversion. Some ways you can support the liver detox pathways would be eating cruciferous and sulfur rich vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, and garlic. Um, it's a it's actually a thyroid myth that these are not good for thyroid function. Reducing sugar and processed foods, avoiding alcohol, and then taking supportive herbs and nutrients to support that liver function. Some of these include magnesium, N-acetylcysteine, milk thistle, dandelion root, turmeric, calcium D-glucarate. I have a Rootcology product called Liver Reset, and it's a powder that I oftentimes recommend for people to help with liver support, and oftentimes they do see results within 2 weeks. I also have a program called the Root Cause Reset that goes really deep into liver support, and you can also get all the information you need on supporting your liver in my book, Hashimoto's Protocol. So it's actually the first protocol. Another cause for poor T4 to T3 conversion is going to be our stress response. If we're under a lot of stress, this is going to impair our T4 to T3 conversion. That could shoot up cortisol, that could shoot up reverse T3. And so, nourishing your adrenals can be the solution for that. We know that thyroid and adrenal function are deeply intertwined, and chronic stress, HPA axis dysfunction, cortisol imbalances can suppress TSH, reduce that T4 to T3 conversion, and really worsen thyroid symptoms. I just did a solo episode on the adrenals and how to support them when you have thyroid dysfunction. I also have a complete book that I wrote about this, Adrenal Transformation Protocol. And I cover all of this in my fatigue and brain fog program. And the second protocol in my Hashimoto's protocol is actually an adrenal protocol. And what does that mean to support and nourish your adrenals? So they are your stress glands and they produce your stress hormones. One of the ways we can support them is by de-stressing. That means getting plenty of sleep, getting plenty of rest, not burning the candle at both ends, balancing our blood sugar, removing inflammatory foods from our diet, sometimes removing inflammatory people. Oftentimes, we might benefit from utilizing B vitamins, vitamin C, electrolytes, magnesium. And I personally love to use adaptogens. Some of them include rhodiola, ashwagandha, holy basil. I have a product by Rootcology called Adrenal Support that can be very, very helpful for that. It does contain ashwagandha. Interestingly, ashwagandha has been studied to support the T4 to T3 conversion, especially if your poor conversion is stress induced. And I would say in this day and age, A lot of us are under stress. We live in the modern world. And so this can be something that can be incredibly helpful for feeling better when you have a thyroid condition. Beyond supplements, there's also gentle practices like walking, breath work, spending time in nature, spending time in sunshine, prioritizing sleep. These can significantly reduce stress on your thyroid adrenal axis. And I highly do recommend this as part of a healing strategy for anybody with any kind of autoimmune condition, with any kind of health condition, right? Is like have less stress. Now, speaking of stress, exercise wisely is another one of my strategies because excessive exercise can be a problem when you overdo it. That can actually impair your T4 and T3 conversion. However, moderate exercise can improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, and promote thyroid hormone activation. So, if you're somebody that is overdoing, maybe step back. But if you're underdoing your exercise, consider gentle ways of moving your body, maybe doing some walking, gentle strength training, Pilates, yoga, some really nourishing exercises for your body. The goal is to feel energized after the exercise and like you can do the whole thing over again once more. If you do your exercise and then you feel super depleted, and then the next day you have to rest, and the day after that, and the day after that, that's going to be sign that you are overdoing it and you need to step it back. But we do know that getting some good exercise can actually help you convert your T4 to T3. Beyond exercise, I also am a big proponent of gut health for everybody with a thyroid condition. About 20% of T4 to T3 conversion happens in the gut, specifically through the action of intestinal bacterial enzymes. And if you have gut inflammation, dysbiosis, or intestinal permeability, this process is going to be really disturbed. And so you might want to look into common causes, co occurring infections in Hashimoto's like H. pylori, SIBO, protozoa, low stomach acid. All of these can be potentially problematic for T4 to T3 conversion. For example, when you don't have enough stomach acid, then you're not going to be absorbing your zinc and your iron, and that can actually lead to poor T4 to T3 conversion. And I would say that most people with Hashimoto's do have some degree of intestinal permeability and some gut issues that they need to work through. The things that can be very helpful for many people include gentle gut support, like, for example, zinc, L-glutamine, and probiotics. In some cases, people do need to dig a little bit deeper. They might need to get tested for H. pylori, SIBO, or various type of protozoa. That can be contributing to intestinal permeability. And I actually have a whole gut protocol in my book, The Hashimoto's Protocol, that focuses on how to support your gut when you have Hashimoto's. Last but not least, you may wish to consider anti inflammatory herbs and nutrients to support T4 to T3 conversion. Cytokines, which are associated with autoimmune disease, they're oftentimes going to be elevated and they are inflammatory and they can really inhibit that activity of the deiodinase enzymes that help with T4 to T3 conversion. And some of these anti inflammatory antioxidants include rosemary extract, curcumin, resveratrol, quercetin, and then omega-3 fatty acids or fish oils. These are all excellent at reducing that inflammation that can potentially block T4 to T3 conversion. There's also an herb called Google extract, and not like the Google we all know and love, but it's spelled Guggul. This is a botanical compound that has been clinically studied to help with enhancing T3 levels and supporting that T4 to T3 conversion. Okay, so in summary, what you need to do to support your own T3 production is you would want to avoid the common conversion blockers. You want to look into your ferritin levels, make sure they're not low. Support your levels of zinc, vitamin A, D, and selenium. Support your liver and adrenals. Make sure you do mindful exercise. Support your gut. Consider anti inflammatory herbs and nutrients as well as look into the herb Google. I'm really excited to share with you that I just released a new product in the Rootcology product line called Thyroid Conversion Support. And it does contain a little bit of vitamin A, a little bit of vitamin D, some vitamin E, which acts as an antioxidant, a little bit of iodine, not too much because too much can be excessive in Hashimoto's, some zinc, and selenium. All of these can support proper conversion of T4 to T3, as well as Google extract, rosemary extract, and a little bit of ashwagandha to help support that T4 to T3 conversion. I have had people asking me for many years what they can do when they're not able to take T3 containing medications. And so this is an option for you. You can always get all the ingredients as standalone options, but I wanted to create this product as a convenient way for you to support your thyroid conversion. So, if you're still having thyroid symptoms and your free T3 is low, don't assume that you're out of options. There are still things you could look into, including medications, nutrients, lifestyle strategies. I hope that this podcast episode was helpful on your healing journey. If it resonated with you, please be sure to share with others. And I would love to hear from you what you thought about this podcast episode. If you wanted to try the thyroid conversion support, you can use the code podcast to get 20% off over at rootcology.com. And I wanted to let you know that if you're looking to support your energy levels, I do have an upcoming program called Fatigue and Brain Fog Fix that you can join. And this is a transformational program that looks at various root causes of thyroid fatigue so that you can thrive and feel your best in just a few weeks. We do have incredible results with 92% of people having less brain fog and 89% of people having more energy. So I hope this has been helpful on your healing journey. Until next time.